Shabbat Shalom. Happy New Year. Did you know that prayer has rules? It seems odd that something as personal and intimate as conversation with the divine should come with externally imposed rules. But even our own spontaneous individual prayer, in moments that stir us to pray without a book in hand, comes with guidance from our tradition. We have an order of Mishnah dedicated to prayer called Brachot, and an entire corresponding tractate of Talmud by the same name. And one of the rules we get is this: Haya vav aderech v'shama kol tzvacha ba'ir v'amar yehi ratzon shelo yehiyu elu b'nei veiti hare zot tfilat shav. One who was walking on the path home and heard the sound of a scream in the city and says, "May it be God's will that this scream will not be from my house. It is a prayer in vain." Tfilat shav means vain or empty prayer. Our rabbis say it's empty prayer to learn about destruction back home in your city and say, "Oh God, please not my house." Many of us in this sanctuary are heartsick, thinking about loved ones, family and friends in LA who are facing multiple horrific fires, which have, as of yesterday, scorched over 35,000 acres, claimed 10 lives, and resulted in the evacuation of at least 180,000 people, with 200,000 more under evacuation warning. For so many, the air is harmful to breathe, the water dangerous to drink unless boiled first. Many have lost their homes, cherished lifelong possessions, schools, livelihoods, houses of worship, left only with ashes and ruin. And if you're like me, you may have found yourself desperately, instinctively praying, "Oh God, please not my brother or sister's house, not my son or daughter, grandson or granddaughter's, friends, please God, not my house." As the news unfolds, we learn more details about what's lost. The historic 100-year-old Pasadena Jewish Temple and Center was my niece and nephew's synagogue, where they went to day school. Their elementary school was also burned down. So my brother David and sister-in-law Sammy are actively trying to figure out what's next for their children. My sister Rachel and brother-in-law Andrew are thankfully not forced to evacuate, but with her due date just a couple days away, Rachel really can't leave anyway. And she will literally be welcoming her new baby to a world on fire. I know that many of us are carrying similar stories and deep concern with us into this Shabbat. We're so far away here in snowy Cleveland, but on Shabbat, we turn to our community and we turn to our God in prayer. How do we pray correctly, if there is such a thing? What's so in vain or empty about that prayer which arises instinctively, automatically, "Please protect my house"? The answer the rabbis give is that if you heard a scream, something's already happened. We can't pray for it not to have happened. That's a useless prayer. But I want to suggest a different answer, which is that our tradition doesn't want us thinking in terms of my house and your house. On Shabbat, the line between my private domain and your private domain is ostensibly eliminated thanks to a legal construct called the Eruv, a rope that encircles our neighborhood so that everything within that circle is a shared domain. It's an empty prayer then, because when we hear a scream, it is from our house, even if it isn't. That's the Jewish response to calamity, to affirm the interconnectivity of all things, the oneness of all things. That's why the Midrash says that when our ancestor Jacob dies this week in Parshat Vayechi, he wants to know whether his children will overcome that which divides them and makes them different in order to carry on their Judaism as a unified family. To which they declare, "Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad." Hear, our Father Israel, The Lord is our God, the Lord is one. In response to heartbreaking loss, we affirm the oneness of God, the oneness of God's creatures, the interconnectivity of all things, echad. We're not meant to think in terms of your house or my house. It's the same house. There's another story in the Talmud about a man named Choni HaMe'agel, which means Choni, the circle maker. Choni has a special relationship with God, and God listens with special attention to Choni's prayer. It's a time of famine and drought, so the people come to Choni and beseech him to ask God for rain. Choni draws a circle in the ground around himself and says, "Master of the universe, I will not set foot outside this circle until you have mercy upon your children and answer their prayers for rain." Rain begins to trickle down in small droplets. So Choni says, "This isn't the rain I asked for. I wanted real rain, rain to fill cisterns, ditches, and caves." Rain begins to fall furiously. All the people of Jerusalem surround Choni and cry out, "It's too much. Make it stop." So Choni prays, "Master of the universe, I didn't ask for this rain either. This is the rain of damage and destruction, while I wanted rain of benevolence and blessing." I find two enduring lessons in this text. One is that for all our perceived mastery over nature, we still can't control how much rain falls or which way the wind blows. We're in relationship with the planet that responds to us, to our behavior, to our demands of it. And that response can be dangerous, detrimental, and not what we asked for. So we have to ask ourselves not just what we demand of our earth, but what our earth demands of us. Our children are being born into a world on fire. How can we allow this? The other lesson I take from it is how we, like Choni, draw circles, our own circles of concern. On one hand, we have to. For one thing, we can't respond to everyone's needs equally. We have to start with our own selves so that we're strong enough to tend to our family's needs. Then we enlarge that circle of concern to encapsulate our community, our tribe. That's what tribalism is, commitment to the shared particular. And that's where identity lives, where meaning and purpose thrive. And if you've been to a particularly good sports game recently, the Cavs, not the Browns, Ohio State, I'm told I have to say O-H. You see the extraordinary unifying power that comes with affiliation with a team. Tribalism is a good thing. But Choni can't draw a circle only around himself, and neither can we. Globalism is the recognition that we all share the same circle in space that God drew, encapsulating all of us. So when our city is on fire, even if it's not our team, it is. "Please God, not my house," is an empty prayer because it is our house, even if it isn't. Elay is reminding us that home is burning. And our Jewish tradition, our Jewish tribalism reminds us that Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad, that in response to heartbreaking loss, we affirm the oneness of God, the oneness of God's creatures, the interconnectivity of all things, Echad. Choni, who drew a circle around himself, is that same character we meet in another much more famous Talmudic tale, where Choni meets an old man planting a carob tree. "Fool," he tells the old man, "do you really expect to live another 70 years to enjoy the fruit from this tree?" "No," replies the old man, "but when I grew up, I found a world full of carob trees. Just as my ancestors planted for me, so I am planting for my children and my children's children." One more lesson from our tradition. God appears to the prophet Elijah on the same mountain where Torah is given to Moses, with the flash of lightning, the crash of thunder, the overpowering might of elemental forces. But Elijah doesn't find God in those destructive forces of nature. And lo, God passed by. There was a great and mighty wind, splitting mountains and shattering rocks by God's power. But God was not in the wind. After the wind, an earthquake, but God was not in the earthquake. After the earthquake, fire, but God was not in the fire. And after the fire, a still small voice. The kol demama daka. Don't see God in the destruction, Judaism tells us. Find God in the response. And the brave first responders who risk life and limb to extinguish the fires, and neighbors who expand their circles of concern to see your house as my house, and congregants in this sanctuary who have already reached out to the clergy to ask, what can we do for LA? We can donate to the Jewish Federation of Los Angeles Wildfire Crisis Relief Fund. We can donate to the California Fire Foundation. We can check in with each other and ask how loved ones are doing. We can ask ourselves what kind of world we're leaving to our children, and we can enlarge our circles of concern. A globalism born of tribalism. We can plant carob trees because we just lost a whole lot of them. This week, Joseph blesses his grandchildren, Ephraim and Manasseh, saying, Hamalach hagoel oti mikol ra, yevarech et hane'arim, v'yikare v'hem shemi, v'shem avotai, Avraham v'Yitzchak, v'yidgu larov b'kerev haaretz. The messenger who has redeemed me from all harm, bless the lads. In them may my name be recalled, and the names of my fathers, Abraham and Isaac, and may they be teeming multitudes upon the earth. On Shabbat, we pray, not empty prayers, but prayers that are full of meaning, hope, and possibility. On his deathbed, Jacob blesses the next generation, hoping to leave them with a better world than he had. That's our prayer this week, that God is not in the fire, but in our response to it. So I want to invite you to sing with me on page 297 of our Etz Chaim Chumash, this week's Parsha, page 297 at the top, Hamalach HaGoel. Hamalach HaGoel oti, Hamalach HaGoel oti mikol ra, yevarech et haneharim, v'kareh v'shem shemi. Hamalach HaGoel oti, Hamalach HaGoel oti mikol ra, yevarech et haneharim, v'kareh v'hem shemi. V'shem avotai, v'shem avotai, Avraham v'Yitzchak, v'yidgu larov, b'kerev haaretz. V'shem avotai, Avraham v'Yitzchak, v'yidgu larov, b'kerev haaretz. Shabbat shalom.